The wind howled through the towering pine trees like a wounded animal, whipping the falling snow into a blinding frenzy. John pressed on through the whiteout conditions, his ski poles the only guide in the swirling blizzard. Behind him, faint outlines of his friends struggled to keep up in the deteriorating weather. "We need to turn back," called Emily over the roar of the storm. John knew she was right, but was loath to admit defeat after they'd come so far. The remote mountain lodge was still miles away, and the forest offered no shelter from the onslaught. As the group convened, their breath formed clouds that were snatched away. "It's too dangerous to continue," said Mark, usually the joker, but now dead serious. John saw the fear in Sarah's eyes as she clutched his arm, her lips already tinged blue. Reluctantly, he agreed they had no choice. Retracing their tracks proved impossible amid the featureless whitewash consuming the mountains. John pulled out his phone, but of course there was no signal this far from civilization. The friends huddled together, their only warmth coming from each other's bodies, pressed close. Emily recalled a survival technique. "We need to build an igloo, like shelter to get out of the wind." It was their best option, but night was falling fast and the temperature plummeting. Working frantically, they piled the wind, hardened snow into crude walls. Within the small space, their breath condensed into icy droplets on the low ceiling. Crammed together in the dim cave, an uneasy silence fell as exhaustion took over. John held Sarah tightly, feeling her shivering subside into an unsettling stillness. Had hypothermia already set in? Panic rose in his throat, but he forced it down, knowing they must rest to regain strength. Sometime later, John awoke with a start. An ominous rumbling sound was growing louder, like distant thunder beneath the snow. In a flash of horror, he realized their makeshift shelter was collapsing upon them. A blinding white filled his vision as the walls caved in, snow pouring down to bury them alive in their frozen tomb. John awoke with a start, his heart pounding, disoriented in the suffocating darkness. He reached out instinctively and felt the thick snow packed tightly around him. The rumbling had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by his ragged breathing. "Sarah," he croaked, his voice muffled. No response. Panic rose like bile in his throat. He flailed his arms, feeling the unyielding snow in every direction. Trapped. A faint whimper came from beside him. "John." Sarah's trembling voice was barely audible. He grasped her hand in the blackness, relieved beyond words to feel her pulse fluttering beneath her icy skin. "We're here. Just stay calm," he soothed, though he was anything but. His other hand brushed against something solid. "Marks, wake up, wake up." A groan of, "5 more minutes, Mom." Even in their nightmare, Mark tried to lighten the mood, but his attempt at humor fell flat in the suffocating dark. John felt around more urgently. Emily. Emily. Silence. His heart seized in panic. Had she been crushed in the cave? In? A muffled cough answered him. "I'm here." Emily's voice was strained with pain. John's relief was short, lived as the full horror of their situation sank in. Buried alive and trapped, with no way to dig themselves out. Friends huddled together, their ragged breathing, the only sound penetrating the thick snow pressing in from all sides. John struggled to remain calm for the others' sake, but inside he was screaming. How long until their air ran out? How long until the crushing cold stopped their hearts? Emily broke the silence, her analytical mind already assessing options. We need to stay warm and conserve oxygen. Talking will help keep us awake, but we must remain calm. Easier said than done, thought John. But he knew panicking would be fatal. Okay, let's think step by step. First, we dig out a space above us. He felt around and located the ceiling, packed inches from their faces. Using their gloved hands, they began clawing at the snow. Desperately, but it was like trying to tunnel through solid concrete. Their fingers grew numb, almost instantly in the sub-zero temperatures. After what seemed like hours, they had barely made a dent. Mark's voice was strained. It's no use. We'll freeze to death before we break through. John refused to give up. Keep going. We have to try and stay warm. But he knew Mark was right. At this rate, hypothermia would claim them long before they dug to the surface. Time ceased to have meaning as the friends burrowed hopelessly in the suffocating dark. Their fingers were raw and bleeding, nails cracked and splintered from clawing at the unyielding snow. John's arms ached with a dull, bone-deep pain. How long had they been trapped? Hours, maybe. It was impossible to tell in the lightless tomb. His thoughts drifted wearily until Emily's voice pulled him back. We need to rest, she said gently. Conserve our strength. John knew she was right, but resting meant accepting their likely fate. He slumped back against the snow, the others huddling close for warmth. As exhaustion overtook them, John's mind wandered to happier memories on the surface. Long hikes through colorful aspen groves, camping under starry skies. Anything to escape this nightmare, but no amount of imagination could dull the crushing reality. Sometime later, John stirred to the sound of muffled sobs. Sarah was crying softly, her body shaking. I'm so cold. I just want to go home. John held her tightly but had no words of comfort left. Mark broke the tense silence. Maybe if we spread out, the snow will settle and leave a gap. But Emily shook her head slowly, her breath coming in shallow pants. It's too densely packed. We'd just displace it, not clear a way out. Panic rose like bile in John's throat. They were trapped in an inescapable snowy coffin, slowly suffocating and freezing to death. His friend's ragged breathing was the only sound penetrating the darkness, each exhalation stealing away more of their precious air. When would the oxygen run out, forcing them into an icy unconsciousness from which they'd never wake? John clutched Sarah desperately, feeling her heartbeat slowing with each passing minute as hypothermia set in. This couldn't be it. Not like this. After everything they'd been through together, to end alone in the crushing dark. Hot tears stung John's eyes and froze on his cheeks. He had to get them out of here. Had to try something, anything, before it was too late. But as the friends huddled in hopeless silence, the crushing snow pressed ever closer, an icy shroud slowly smothering their fading breaths until only death's frigid embrace remained. John drifted in and out of consciousness, the line between dreams and reality blurred in the suffocating dark. Each time he awoke, it took a moment to remember the nightmare was real, trapped in a frozen tomb, slowly suffocating as the others' ragged breaths grew weaker. How long had they been buried? It felt like days, though it could have been mere hours. Time ceased to have meaning in the lightless void. John's thoughts wandered deliriously until Emily's strained voice pulled him back. We need to keep talking, she whispered hoarsely. Help me think of ways to dig out. But John could barely muster the energy to speak. His mind was numb, body heavy as lead. Mark broke the tense silence instead. Maybe if we spread out the impact? No, we tried that, snapped Emily, her words slurring together. Mark fell silent, wounded John knew they were all unraveling, tempers fraying as hypothermia set in. Sarah whimpered softly, curled into John's lifeless arms. "I'm so cold. Please, just let me sleep." John shook her gently. "No. Stay awake," he pleaded, though his own eyelids drooped heavily. A sudden outburst made them jump. "This is pointless," yelled Mark, his voice cracking. "We're going to die down here while you drag it out with useless ideas." Emily recoiled as if struck, but Mark was on a hysterical rant, his terror transforming into rage. "It's your fault we're trapped. You had to go on this stupid trip. If we'd stayed home, like I said, we wouldn't be buried under a ton of fucking snow right now." Emily broke down in sobs, curling in on herself. John mustered the last of his strength. "Mark, enough. We're all scared, but fighting won't help. We have to work together." But Mark was beyond reason in his panic. "Just shut up, John. You're not my dad. I never wanted to come on this trip. I never wanted to die like this." His screams echoed in the enclosed space, the others cringing from his verbal blows. A heady silence fell as Mark dissolved into wretched sobs, the last of his courage spent. John knew in their fading states, cooperation might now be impossible. Time ceased to have meaning as the friends drifted in and out of consciousness. Their ragged breaths had slowed to an unnaturally lethargic pace, bodies shutting down in the freezing darkness. John stirred weakly, disoriented. How long had they been trapped underground? It felt like an eternity. His thoughts wandered deliriously until a sudden movement jolted him fully awake. Sarah was thrashing beside him, clawing desperately at the snow, packed inches from her face. "No, no, no, please let me out," she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. John grasped her flailing arms gently. "Sarah, it's okay. You're not alone." But she was lost in hysterics, hyperventilating in the enclosed space. "I can't breathe. I'm going to die down here." Her cries echoed endlessly, the others cringing from the deafening sound. Emily stirred with great effort. "Sarah, listen to me. You must calm down or you'll use all the air." But Sarah was beyond reason, thrashing wildly as if to tear through solid rock. John held her tightly, feeling her heart racing itself to failure. "Please, Sarah, just breathe slowly. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." Gradually, her screams dissolved into wretched sobs, body limp in exhaustion. But the damage was done. Their precious oxygen was nearly spent. In the suffocating silence, John knew their fragile hope was shattered. Even if by some miracle they dug free, hypothermia and asphyxiation had already claimed them. He pulled Sarah and the others close with his numb arms, feeling their sluggish heartbeats slowing in unison. So this was how it would end. Not with a fight, but buried alive in the crushing dark, slowly suffocating as the others slipped away one by one. John closed his burning eyes, welcoming the icy embrace of death to end this nightmare at last. John drifted in and out of consciousness. The line between waking and death blurred. Each ragged breath was a battle, lungs seizing in the thinning air. Beside him, the others lay motionless. Had they already slipped away? A part of John welcomed the end, ready to succumb to the icy void. But something deeper within refused to let go without a fight. With immense effort, he pried open heavy eyelids to blackness. Then he heard it, a faint rhythmic pounding in the distance. At first, he dismissed it as a hallucination, but it continued steadily. Rescue. With a surge of adrenaline, John grasped Sarah's limp wrist and was flooded with relief at the flutter beneath her frozen skin. "He's alive," John croaked, voice barely audible. The others stirred weakly at his outburst. Above them, the pounding grew louder as their salvation drew near, refusing to give up on the lost souls below. Gathering his last reserves of strength, John began hammering back against the snowy ceiling with numb fists. "Here, we're down here," he screamed, lungs searing. The others joined in ragged chorus until their cries merged as one desperate plea for deliverance. Suddenly, a crack of light appeared above, snow cascading down in clumps. Fresh air, sweet as any perfume, rushed into the suffocating void. Blinded figures appeared, backlit, angels come to raise them from the underworld. Hands grasped them, dragging limp bodies into the blinding whiteout. As darkness closed in, John saw a blur of activity around the others, before unconsciousness claimed him at last. When he awoke, sunlight warmed his face through the window. An unfamiliar room came into focus. The hospital ward. Beside him, Sarah stirred and opened her eyes, color returning to her cheeks. "She's alive," a nurse confirmed. Tears in her eyes. "They're all going to make it, thanks to your will, to survive against impossible odds." Though their ordeal was over, its scars would remain forever etched in their memories. But for now, in each other, they found solace, and in life's simple beauty, they found reason to carry on.